What if I told you that the same God who commanded, "Thou shalt not kill," also ordered the slaughter of entire nations and caused the deaths of millions? From global floods to plagues and wars, the Bible's accounts are both shocking and complex. But are these stories literal, or do they hold deeper, symbolic meanings? And could people have used God's name as an excuse for their actions? In this video, we'll dive deep into the divine versus diabolical to explore who really has the higher body count and what it means for understanding divine justice. Welcome to one of the most challenging and thought-provoking questions in religious history. Who is responsible for more deaths, God or the devil? While the Bible includes the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," as part of the 10 Commandments given to Moses, it also contains narratives where God directly causes widespread death and instructs his followers, the Israelites, and even his angels to engage in acts of violence to fulfill his divine will. On the other hand, the devil is portrayed as the tempter, leading people into sin and destruction. But when we examine the numbers and the context behind these deaths, the narrative becomes far more nuanced. Are these stories meant to be taken literally, or do they carry deeper metaphorical or symbolic meanings? And perhaps even more provocatively, is it possible that people use the name of God as an excuse for their actions? Today, we'll unravel this paradox and see what it reveals about divine justice, mercy, and the nature of good and evil. The challenge of comparing God and the devil's death tolls isn't just about counting bodies. It's about understanding the deeper implications of these actions. God's commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," found in Exodus 20:13, seems straightforward. Yet this same God is depicted in the Bible as directly causing or commanding the deaths of countless people, often in acts of divine judgment or to fulfill his divine plan. And in many cases, it's not just God who acts. His angels are also sent to carry out these commands. How do we reconcile these actions with the prohibition against killing? And more importantly, are these accounts meant to be taken at face value? Or do they symbolize greater truths about the nature of divine justice? Or could some of these actions have been driven by human motives, with the name of God being used as justification? Let's break down some of the key events where God's direct and indirect actions led to mass deaths. First up is the flood in Genesis 6:9, when God said to Noah,
"I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. I am going to bring flood waters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, every creature that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them."
Genesis 6:13-22. This is perhaps the most dramatic example, where God decides to cleanse the earth of human wickedness by flooding it, sparing only Noah, his family, and a pair of each animal species. The death toll here is immense, potentially millions, though the Bible doesn't provide an exact figure. Then there's the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, where God rains down burning sulfur, wiping out 2 entire cities due to their sinfulness. Here, angels are involved as well. They are sent to rescue Lot and his family before the destruction occurs. Genesis 19:13, 19:24-25. Next, we have the plagues in Egypt, Exodus 7-12. Where God sends a series of devastating plagues to compel Pharaoh to release the Israelites from slavery. This wasn't just a punishment, it was a divine contest between God and the gods of Egypt. Each plague challenged the power of specific Egyptian deities, culminating in the final, most devastating plague, the death of all the firstborns in Egypt. It was carried out by the destroyer, often interpreted as an angel of death sent by God. Exodus 12:23, 12:29-30. This plague wasn't limited to people. It extended to the firstborn of all animals as well. The result was widespread death and mourning throughout the land, as God's power decisively proved superior to the gods of Egypt. But this also raises profound questions about the nature of divine justice and the morality of such widespread death, especially when innocent children were among the victims. 2 Kings 19:35 states,
And it came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went out, and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses.
In simpler terms, this verse describes how an angel of God went into the Assyrian camp during the night and killed 185,000 soldiers. When the remaining Assyrians woke up the next morning, they were surrounded by the dead bodies of their comrades. This event is a significant demonstration of God's power and protection of his people. The Assyrians had been threatening Jerusalem, but God intervened miraculously to save the city. Korah's rebellion in Numbers 16 is another significant episode. During this event, God opens the earth to swallow the rebels and sends a plague that kills 14,700 people. In 2 Samuel 24:15 it says,
So the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel from the morning till the appointed time. From Dan to Beersheba, 70,000 of the people from the people died.
This verse describes the devastating consequence of David's decision to number the Israelites. God sent a plague as punishment, resulting in the deaths of 70,000 people across the land. In this case, the Bible mentions that an angel of the Lord was involved in the execution of this judgment, only stopping when God relented. 2 Samuel 24:15-16. But it's not just about these actions. God also commands the Israelites to carry out his will, often leading to mass killings. In the Conquest of Canaan, described in the book of Joshua, God commands the Israelites to completely destroy the inhabitants of several cities, including Jericho and Ai. The Israelites are instructed not just to defeat their enemies, but to kill every man, woman, and child. This type of total warfare, known as Heram or the ban, is seen as a divine mandate to cleanse the land of all its previous inhabitants. Joshua 6:20-21, Joshua 8:24-25. Here's a question worth pondering. Could these accounts of mass killings have been influenced by human motivations, with leaders using the name of God as a justification for their actions? Throughout history, we've seen how religion can be used to justify violence and conquest. Is it possible that the same dynamic was at play here? Did some of these actions reflect human ambitions cloaked in divine authority? And what about the role of Satan in causing death? In the book of Job, we see a different kind of divine interaction.
And the Lord said to Satan,
From where have you come?
Satan answered the Lord and said,
From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it.
Have you considered, my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?
Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face.
Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand.
Here, Satan is granted permission by God to test Job's faith. As part of this test, Satan causes a storm that kills Job's children. This story highlights Satan's influence in bringing about death and suffering, though it's essential to note that this happens with God's permission. The exact number of people who died isn't specified beyond Job's 7 sons and 3 daughters, but this event underscores the complex interplay between divine will and satanic influence in the Bible. To fully grasp the gravity and complexity of these divine commands and actions, we need to explore more examples where God's will led to mass deaths and consider different interpretations of these events. One of the most well-known examples is the Battle of Jericho, found in Joshua 6. Here, God instructs Joshua to lead the Israelites in a 7-day siege of the city. On the 7th day, the walls of Jericho miraculously collapse after the Israelites march around them and blow their trumpets. God then commands the Israelites to kill every living thing in the city, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Joshua 6:21.
And the Lord said unto Joshua,
See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass, that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up every man straight before him.
Joshua 6:1-5. The city is completely destroyed, with only Rahab the prostitute and her family spared because she helped the Israelite spies. Another significant example is the destruction of the Amalekites in 1 Samuel 15. God commands King Saul to
Go and completely destroy those wicked people, the Amalekites. Wage war against them until you have wiped them out.
found in 1 Samuel 15:3. Saul is instructed to kill all the men, women, children, infants, and even the animals.
Samuel said to Saul,
I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says.
I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys.
Although Saul partially disobeys by sparing the Amalekite king and some livestock, this command underscores the brutal and comprehensive nature of God's instructions. Then there's the conquest of Ai, described in Joshua 8. After a failed first attempt, God gives Joshua specific instructions on how to ambush and capture the city. The Israelites follow these orders, and when the city is taken, 12,000 men and women fell that day, all the people of Ai. Joshua 8:25. Like Jericho, Ai is completely annihilated, with its king being hanged and its remains reduced to a heap of ruins. These examples of Heram warfare, where entire populations are wiped out at God's command, are some of the most challenging passages in the Bible. They seem to directly contradict the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," raising difficult questions about divine justice and morality. But is there more to these stories than meets the eye? Some theologians argue that these acts, while severe, were necessary to establish Israel in the Promised Land and to protect the purity of the Israelite faith from the corrupting influences of the surrounding nations. From this perspective, the mass killings serve a purpose within a divine plan that humans might not fully understand. Others suggest that these stories might have metaphorical or symbolic meanings, representing the struggle between good and evil, purity and corruption, rather than literal historical accounts. For instance, the destruction of Jericho and other Canaanite cities could be seen as symbolic of the Israelites' spiritual journey and the eradication of sin from their midst. Moreover, the concept of divine judgment is central to these narratives. God's actions, while harsh, are often portrayed as necessary to uphold divine justice. The flood, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the plagues of Egypt can be seen as acts of judgment against rampant sin and corruption. These stories may not only recount historical events, but also serve as moral and spiritual lessons, warning against the consequences of turning away from God. In contrast, the devil's influence in the Bible is more about leading people into sin rather than commanding large-scale killings. In the book of Job, God allows Satan to test Job's faith, resulting in the devastating storm that kills all of Job's children. This narrative showcases Satan's role in bringing about suffering and death, but it also raises questions about the nature of God's justice and the purpose of such trials. While Satan's actions are directly responsible for the deaths, they occur within the broader context of God's permission, adding another layer of complexity to our understanding of divine and satanic roles in the Bible.
So, what's the final verdict?
If we look purely at the numbers, God's commands, whether through Heram warfare, plagues, divine interventions, or the actions of angels, result in the deaths of thousands, if not millions. This includes some of the most vulnerable, such as women, children, and infants, in actions that seem to contradict the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." The devil, while leading people into sin and causing significant harm, is more often associated with spiritual and moral destruction, rather than direct, large-scale physical death. However, in the case of Job, we see Satan's role in directly causing death, albeit with divine permission, which complicates the narrative further. But here's where it gets even more complex. It's worth considering if human motivations, masked by divine justification, played a role in some of these biblical events. History shows that religion has been exploited to legitimize conflicts and violence. Is it possible a similar pattern exists within certain biblical narratives? This raises questions about the distinction between divine justice and human ambition within these texts. Additionally, when we consider the possibility that these stories carry deeper metaphorical or symbolic meanings, the interpretation becomes more complicated. The higher body count may not simply reflect greater power or a harsher form of justice, but could also reveal the multi-layered nature of divine judgment and the moral lessons embedded in these ancient texts. The Bible's stories may not only serve as records of divine actions, but also as timeless allegories about the consequences of sin and the need for spiritual purity. Some argue that these deaths, however brutal, were necessary for the fulfillment of God's plan and the establishment of Israel. Others view these stories as metaphorical or symbolic, representing the struggle between good and evil, purity and corruption, rather than literal historical accounts. This ongoing debate reflects the rich and multifaceted nature of the Bible, where different interpretations can coexist and continue to provoke thought and discussion. In conclusion, while God's actions and commands have resulted in far more documented deaths than the devil's, this analysis challenges us to think deeply about the nature of divine justice, mercy, and the complexities of interpreting sacred texts. The Bible is not just a historical document, it's a profound narrative that has been interpreted in countless ways over the centuries. These stories might hold metaphorical or symbolic meanings that go beyond their literal descriptions, offering moral and spiritual lessons that resonate across time. And perhaps most intriguingly, we must consider the possibility that some actions attributed to divine command may have been driven by human motives, with the name of God being used as justification. How we understand these stories can vary widely depending on our perspective, beliefs, and the context in which we read them. What's your take? How do you reconcile the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," with the divine actions depicted in the Bible? I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you interpret these stories? And what do they say about divine justice, human motives, and evil? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. Ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, explore, learn, and stay curious.